Essence magazine reports that in today's NFL, only 23% of the agents representing players, broadcasters, or coaches are female, leaving it open for females to truly make their mark in a league that's dominated by men. With this in mind, you may be asking yourself, what's the key as a woman to break into player representation in the NFL? Well, if you spent any length of time pondering that question, I'm glad you've stumbled upon this podcast. Because I had the distinct pleasure of having a conversation with Jill McBride Baxter. She is indeed the daughter of Hall of Fame football coach Ron McBride. She was indeed born into a football family, and it runs deep within her bloodstream. She also married a renowned college football coach. She turned her love of law and passion for football into a career that has now spanned more than 2 decades, representing players and coaches alike. During my time with Baxter this week, we covered a wide range of topics, including how more women can break into the field of sports representation, how we can create a more equitable environment for diversity in sports representation, and how the changing landscape of college football with the introduction of NIL deals has changed the way agents recruit and retain top and on the bubble talent. And in case you were wondering, you have no reason to worry, because indeed we did spend a portion of our conversation chatting about the second coming of Christmas in many NFL households and across the league, when we touched upon what Baxter thinks is going to happen in Thursday's NFL draft. I had a wonderful time having a lively and fruitful conversation with Baxter, which I'm now excited to share with all of you. So without further delay, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Jill, first and foremost, I want to thank you for being here this afternoon on a very exciting week as we enter the NFL draft week. Great to see you this afternoon. And thank you so very much for being here.
Yeah, no problem.
Absolutely. So, Jill, tell me, I know that your family root from deep in football. You're a daughter of a famous coach, and you've been around football all your life. So tell me about how important football is to you, my friend.
Okay, well, yeah, I basically say that I grew up on a football field because when my parents were in college, we went to practice. We went to games. My mom has pictures of us where she's pregnant. And where is she? She's on the practice field herself. So we were always going to a football game. We were always going to practice. I sometimes would go recruiting with my dad, like to high school games or whatever, when he's looking for, players for to sign for the next year. And yeah, I've done it my whole life. I don't think there's very many Saturdays where I wasn't at a game. And then On Sundays, I'm usually watching the NFL games. And then if I wasn't at one of my dad's games, then I also married my husband, who's also a college football coach. So I always be going to his game. So Saturdays are always a football game or watching college games, right? So I have a lot of clients that are coaches. So I'm watching their games. I'm watching my husband's games. And then Sunday, I'll be watching the NFL games. And now, NFL games are on Thursdays and Sundays and Mondays. So there's usually a game on.
Well, I tell you, as a football fans, we can never get enough, right, Jill?
Well, yeah, no, I really like football. It's kind of like part of my, DNA, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jill, as you said, you turned your love for football and passion for law into becoming an agent. So tell me about your transition to becoming an agent and your passion for law and how they intersect as well.
Yeah, so what happened was when I was in my second year of law school, honestly, my dad called me and he said, hey, Gary's getting a contract with the Rams and he needs somebody to represent him and you need to do it. And I was like, Dad, I'm in my second year of law school. I don't do that. And he said, yeah, but you can. I know you can. And I'm like, okay. So at the time, I was actually president of the sports law forum at my law school. I was also president of the women's caucus. And I had just had Lee Steinberg come speak. And this was when Lee was much, much younger than he is now. But so I called Lee's office and I just said, hey, what do I have to do to represent NFL players? He goes, oh, you just got to pay money to the union and get certified and go to a meeting. And I said, that's it? And back then, that's all you had to do. It was in 1987. And so I just called the NFL Players Union and filled out the paperwork and got certified. And then I had to go to a meeting. It was quite simple back then. Now it's completely different. You have to take a test and, they do a whole background check and you got to have the right insurance and it's much more regulated now. But back then there was maybe 20 people, that were representing people. That was it. It wasn't a lot. Now there's a whole lot more, right? There's a lot more people. So, and because as more players got representation, because in 1987, a lot of players didn't even have representation. Some did, some didn't. And now, all of them except for maybe one right now that's representing himself. But most players do have representation, right? So, and fast forward, what also has happened in my world is coaches have representation, athletic administrators do, media does, and it's all because of the contracts. Contracts are much more complicated. There's a lot of wording that needs to be researched and or deleted if possible. So, things have changed because the environment has changed. The money is more. So there's a lot more to lose on either side. And people realize that, yeah, I need to have a lawyer look at my contract or negotiate my deal. So I have a lot of representatives now, including the other thing is NIL has opened up a whole new avenue. So I've got some college athletes in the NIL space, but I also just signed a new boxer, Marcus Castro, who I'm getting deals for him too, because I'm really back in the endorsement deal side of it. And I did represent a UFC for 8 years, and so I really understand that world too. And that's really getting deals and endorsements to put on their shorts and stuff like that. And that's now happening in the college space for all athletes. So that's opened up a whole nother avenue of ways to represent people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a long answer to your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe, since you brought it up, I'm curious to ask you about whether you think NIL deals will be sustainable, or whether you think that whole process has to be regulated in some way.
Well, here's the deal with NIL where it's gotten a little muddy, is that the transfer portal, NIL, and collectives have created an environment in which nobody exactly anticipated that's what was going to happen. Okay. And what's happening is exactly what they didn't want to happen was people are stealing players from us by giving them better NIL deals. And it's really illegal, but it's hard to like say, if a coach or says, our players are earning around this much money in the NIL space, they can say that. It's just that when you induce somebody with that information or promise something to somebody, that's where it gets a little dicey. So the industry has grown very quickly, and it is billions of dollars already. So is it going to slow down? I don't know. There's a lot of brands that are, if somebody has a large social media following and they're a college athlete, they're attractive to lots of brands. If that's their demographics. If their demographics are college kids, like let's say Dial's doing a lot, with athletes, deodorant. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So there's certain companies that are attracted to athletes that have a lot of social media followers. A lot of mobile companies have done stuff. So it's growing right now. It's not stopping.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Jill, since we're a day away from the draft, I'm fascinated to ask you about what you think is going to happen tomorrow night and the process of really recruiting players during this time as they look for representation, as they look to sort of make the next jump in their careers.
Yeah. Well, those are two kind of different questions. The draft is a really unpredictable thing. Tomorrow night, you're going to see some guys that, oh yeah, these draft analysts were right. And then you're going to find some guys that aren't right, because the truth is, I am not sitting in the team room with the GM and the head coach and have all the information that they have on the guys they're deciding to draft. Okay. They're really great information gatherers. They're really good at it, and they cannot afford to make a mistake on that first round pick. So, and you don't know, and the other thing is, you don't know as an agent, I don't always know every injury on their team right now. I can look up all the contracts and find out, okay, this guy's up for contract. He's making a lot of money and he's going to be a free agent next year. So I could see where that team would pick this player over this player just because of need, right? Quarterbacks obviously are at a premium, but in this draft, there's not like as many like high profile guys at that position, I don't think. So it so much of it depends on team needs and how they have that kid graded and how that guy fits in their offense, defense, special teams, whatever they're needing. Do they have a coaching change? Are they going to have a total scheme change? Do they have a new GM this year? So the draft is very unpredictable. That's why it's fun to watch. As an agent, what I do is I really track what these teams, who they're picking, because if I have a player at that position, I want to know where they picked as far as a player at the same position that I maybe am representing in this draft or any draft. So I'm carefully analyzing that, and day 2 also. And then day 3, there's about hundreds, probably 20 deals on each team get done 5 minutes after the draft. So you got to track the draft, because in case your client doesn't get drafted, which can happen, you got to know where is going to be the best place to send him, where he has the best chance to make it if he has 5 teams calling him after the draft ends. So you got to analyze it from both perspectives. And if you know a team is interested in a guy and you know where the guy is on their list, like is he a okay, they got him as a number one guy as a 4th-round pick, and they have not picked anybody at that position. I might start calling the team and say, hey, let's say there's 2 teams that are going to draft your guy in the 4th round. I might call and say, hey, I think that, hey, the 49ers are about to draft my guy, and you have the pick for them. I'm just kind of giving you a heads up. That's it. That's the only thing you could kind of do as an agent. But most teams, if I was a team leader, though, I would not be giving any information out to anybody. I would be keeping that private because I don't want them playing my hand during that, during the draft.
Yeah.
So really, like smart GMs are going to tell their scouts, do not tell anybody anything about what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy that's the best at that is Bill Belichick. Mm-hmm. He does not share information with people, and he's smart about that because why would you do that? There's no incentive to do that.
You're right, because it dilutes your competitive advantage, right? So
exactly. It's just like in a game. I'm not going to hand you my playbook, man. I'm not going to tell you what I'm calling on the first play.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, I'm curious to ask you about building relationships because, when you're an agent, building relationships is kind of the lifeblood of your business. And as a female agent yourself, I'm curious for your advice for any other women who are interested in entering the space.
You just need a client, and then you got to start going to stuff. I've been going to the Combine and the Senior Bowl, college practices, college games all the time. So I'm always seeing these people. I go to the pro days, but now I've been doing it for a long time, and so all my friends are still in. My friends with NFL teams are still in, and some of them have become GMs, and I'm good friends with them. But those relationships have been built over a long period of time. I try to go to a lot of like the Shrine Game or the NFLPA Bowl, the Senior Bowl, Combine. All those places are places where you have an opportunity to meet new people. Even if you don't have a player in the Combine or at a game, you might go to the game just to talk to people about a player you have that's playing in the Senior Bowl but not in the Shrine Game. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So you got to have those opportunities to meet new people and touch base with the people you've known for a long time. And like if people come through, my husband coaches at Fresno State now, so when the scouts come through, I usually have them over for dinner or breakfast, or we meet for breakfast, or we'll have them over for dinner. Now you got to know a lot of them are friends with my husband and my dad and me. Some of them are friends with me, don't know my husband. Some of them know both of us. Some of us know all 3 of us, my dad, my husband, and myself. So it's kind of interesting. I went to breakfast with one scout. He had no idea my dad was a coach because my dad's retired now. And I was like, Mark, I can't believe you don't know that about my dad. He goes, no, your husband recruited me. Okay, that did happen. I know your husband, but I didn't know your dad was a coach. And I've known the guy for probably 15 years.
It's a small world after all. I always say, Joe, that life is a constant game of networking, isn't it? Of
course, yeah. So my advice, and that's something I love doing. I really do enjoy seeing my friends. And being a college scout is a friggin' hard job. They're on the road all the time, going from school to school to school. They're away from their families. It's a hard job. People don't realize. I mean, they're so worn out by the end of those pro days because they're starting with first the games like the Shrine Game, NFLPA Bowl, Senior Bowl. Then there's the Combine, and then they have pro days all through March, first week of April, and then they go into draft meetings. They are wiped out by now. Wiped out. They're tired. And because they've been on the road, going from school to school to school to school. It's a lot of energy out there.
Indeed, it brings a whole new meaning to embrace the grind, doesn't it?
It is a grind. I mean, people, oh, it's so much fun. No, this is work. But now I like it. I'm going to tell you, I love what I do. I love my clients. I love all the NFL guys. I unfortunately, as agents, we don't get to interact all that much except for at the combine, and we're all spread out all over the time. Sometimes I'll see them at a pro day, but each year, guys have different clients at different places. So you might see them at a pro day 10 years ago, and you don't see them for 10 years. So my peers we don't interact that much. I do talk to some of the other female agents, and I'm good friends with Laura Oakman, who does sidelines for the NFL. She's a reporter, media. And I'm super close with her and have been for many, many years. So, and she's a great resource too, because she knows everybody in the league.
Yeah,
she's the longest female sideline reporter in the NFL, I think.
Yeah,
she's amazing.
She's been doing a great job for a long time, for sure. And,
yeah.
And Joe, I'm curious to get your thoughts on how you think more females can enter the space of representing players as well.
Well, you know what? I didn't realize in 1987 that I was the only female. I had no idea. I didn't care. I had a client. So I do think right now there is a lot more women than there were certainly when I started, because I was the only one at the time. There weren't even that many men doing it. There just weren't that many agents, right, in the NFL space. Mm-hmm. But I think anybody, if they are really passionate about something, and they want to do it, you gotta get a client. That's the hard part. Dealing with the NFL guys, that's not hard. But getting a client, that's hard, because you gotta have the network to, number one, pick the right player, and you gotta know people, and you gotta be able to get to the player. But that's not easy to do.
Yeah, no,
it's not easy. Yeah. And not only that, if they're a really great player, everybody's hounding them. Mm-hmm. So, you got to start early in that recruiting process, or you have a relationship with somebody. You can utilize your former, clients, and then I have a lot of coaching clients. So a lot of my job work is very, very much referral based. Like most of my clients I get in the NFL space were referred to me by a coach. So they say, you should call Jill, or a scout will refer them. They'll say, no, you should call Jill Baxter. I think she's going to be a good fit for you, because you need somebody who has got a lot of connections, or else nobody's going to know who you are. It's not that hard. I'll be honest with you. Representing draft picks isn't hard. Representing guys that are on the bubble is where they need somebody with connections. That's the harder space to get in. Mm-hmm. You got to really understand that space. If you want to compete for first round picks, they just want money to pay for their training and this, that, and all that. So then you got to do that, which is fine. There's some good trainers out there, but you got to have the money to invest. I discourage people from doing that, because I think it's a bad investment. Because if the guy doesn't go where he thinks he's going to go, and I think they should stay in college and work with their college coach, strength coach, because they know their bodies better. And that's where teams have to work you out anyway. So they go to these outside trainers and move somewhere, and their numbers are good, but maybe they would have been just as good if they'd gone to their strength coach at their college. And a lot of players don't like that. They want to get away and be all pampered. It's like, this is not a pampering. Football's hard. So the training thing is an interesting thing. You got to do it though if you're trying to get a first round pick. But if you start to invest money in guys that are not first round picks, you are gonna go out of business quick. And a lot of my friends have gone out of business because they did that. Because they thought, to get the player, I got to spend this much money and put him in training, and they weren't even a draft pick. You see what I mean? Or they didn't get picked at all.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a layered process for sure, Jill. I'm also curious to ask you about creating more equitable spaces in terms of inclusion in sports media and representing players from a diversity and equity standpoint. When you think of inclusion, what other steps in the business do you think needs to
Well, I think it's funny that you asked that question because I had a long talk with my friend she runs a school district, and I asked her this question. I said, it's a very common question, and I thought and I think this is true. She goes, look, it's systemic and processes that people have to understand that some of the systemic and processes that have been put in place may discriminate against certain people, and so that you really have to look at the systems and the processes that are in place, and do those systems and processes possibly exclude or include certain people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought to myself, well, that's really interesting. I never really thought about it that way. Right now, though, in the NFL, there's the Bill Walsh Diversity Coaching Fellowship, and there's also the Wooten Diversity Internship, which is the scouting area. Mm-hmm. So that's another way, I think, where actually NFL teams have been a lot more open, particularly to women, because there's not that many women in the space. And I think that's a way for, okay, if you aren't going to do the agent side and maybe you want to do the team side, I would definitely apply for the Nunn-Wooten Fellowship on the scouting side or on the coaching side if you want to be a coach. Now, to qualify for the coaching thing, you have to be a current coach or a former NFL player. The scouting side is a little more open-ended as far as you maybe have an opportunity there. But there does have to be and they're trying to make concerted efforts. When I talked to my scouting friends about this, they said, well, just so you know, Jill, some of the women that have got into the scouting area, they're out doing interviews talking about being a woman in the space and they're not doing the work. And I said, well, that's a problem because, this isn't about telling people, oh, I'm the only woman. Who cares? You got to do the work. Mm-hmm. You got to put your head down and do the work. The work is hard.
Jill, I always say that anything worth having is on the other side of hard, right?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying there is, you got to learn what their process is. And their process is you got to look at a ton of film and you have to, analyze the film, and then you got to submit the reports to the department because that's what they need you to do if you're working in scouting. Well, if you don't know how to work the Exos machine and you don't know how to analyze tape on a football player, then you might have a little hard time being in the scouting department because they're not asking you to negotiate deals. They're asking you to analyze players and tell them why this player is better than this one. So, and if you don't know how to do that, then maybe you better start learning how before you go into an environment like that. Because people who are in football or played football, they've been watching film for a long time. They played football, so this is an interesting thing. Since very few females play college football, right? Or even high school football. So they're not learning all that as a young kid. Now, there are some women leagues now, right? Which is good. But, we played flag football in high school, right? As a fun thing for a fundraiser or something, and we played one game and we played flag. We weren't studying the game. How did I learn to study the game? Well, I was at a game. I was at a practice. So I just learned it that's just what we did. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's how I learned the game, was by going to games and practices. But that's how I grew up. So systemically, women in particular have not maybe had the opportunities because they didn't have the opportunity to play the game.
Yeah.
You know, and there are coaches out there, by the way, that did not play the game. Right. So I do know that. So it's not that it's not possible. It is. But think about that systemically, how that would eliminate a lot of people.
Yeah.
You're talking about diversity. When you're talking about a diversity and inclusion, okay, depending on what you define. Also, to play, you got to be off the charts, great player and athlete. So if you're not athletic, also, you're going to have a problem because you never got the opportunity to play because you weren't athletic enough. You see what I mean?
Yeah, the best way to learn and to grow is to be put right into the fire, and if you don't have the opportunity, you can't grow. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I've even thought, boy, I'd really like to do the Nun internship, but I don't know if I can because I work for players. I have to ask one of my GM friends. I thought about submitting an application in and they can just deny me if they want. You see what I'm saying? I think it's important. I think it's important the other side thinks. Mm-hmm. So important in anything that you do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, there's
indeed, Angela, I'm curious
to think about.
Yeah, of course. Angela, I'm curious to ask you about whether you think growing up around the sport gave you a competitive advantage, and some of your favorite memories as an agent, growing up as a daughter of a coach, or now being married to coach as well. So tell me about the competitive advantage you think you've gained considering your upbringing.
Yeah, hold on just 1 minute. I'll answer the question.
Not
question? Hold on.
No, we were about to go in for that.
Oh, yeah, no, that's okay. I'm pulling in.
Okay, good.
All right, I'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you. I'm going to try to have Marcus.
Okay.
I want you to meet him. Or re-meet him. You already know him. Sorry, that's...
On the run, no problem.
I want to set my book up with Angelica's daughter. I just got this new box with her. She's so adorable. But and so is Angelica's. They were just over my house. I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to introduce you to Marcus. Anyways. Okay, so what's your yeah, I like to be the matchmaker too. So what was your last question? Sorry.
No problem. I was just wondering if you believe that growing up around the sport and now being married to someone in football provided you a competitive advantage in the work you do, and some of your favorite memories around the sport.
Of course, it gave me a competitive advantage. I also had parents who didn't put us in a box. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you can do anything. I never even realized that anybody was discriminated against till I got to law school and started reading case law. And I was like, what? Because I didn't grow up in that environment. I grew up in a very, I don't know, there was always somebody at our house. My parents were always helping people, and there just weren't any barriers, right? And then, so growing up with parents like that and also being around football, of course, it's a competitive advantage because I understand the game. I understand how it works. I understand how they think. I understand all the ups and downs. I understand, and I lived it on top of it because then I married into it and found out, oh, by the way, being a coach's wife is a lot harder than being a coach's kid. Because all of a sudden we have kids. I've got my own company. We're moving all over the place, you know. And then and a typical weekend if somebody is in the coaching world, at least for their families, is we usually have company. We take them to the games. You know, there's a whole social thing around this, and it's not a job. It's a lifestyle. Football is a lifestyle. being in football is a lifestyle. It's a 7-day-a-week deal, right? It's not like we just had one of our former players that is a rodeo guy is in town for the rodeo. So he brings his horses over, stays at our house. We go watch him do rodeo. You know what I mean? And he played for my husband 20 years ago. He played for the Giants for a long time, too. He played in the NFL for a long time. So, of course, you have a competitive advantage. There also has been some disadvantages to this because when my husband was coaching at USC, they were petrified that I was an agent because it was when all the Reggie Bush stuff happened. And I was like, yeah, well, guess what? I'm not that kind of an agent, and I don't give people anything, so you don't have to worry. I'm too cheap for that. Yeah. I'm not giving them a dime, and I'm not violating any NCAA rules. So, but the advantage is that I understand the game. I'm around the players. I have more of an advantage because I have access to their parents. But when I was at USC, I couldn't represent any of them. It wasn't allowed. Yeah. It was conflict. So there's sometimes where it's worked for me and sometimes where it's worked against me. Or John will have a great player and they'll be like, what if something goes wrong and I'm being represented by his wife? You know what I'm saying? So that comes up. But so I've probably not gotten players because of my connections as well, but I've gotten players because of my connections. But a lot of my coaching clients, though, which I do like, they will refer players to me, and that's a much cleaner deal because it's just like, hey, I gave him your name. He's interviewing people. I told him you're good. Whatever.
Yeah.
So
it's both sides of the coin for sure. And so my final question for you today has to do with your own professional and personal legacy and how you want that to be defined, and whether or not you view yourself as a role model in the business.
Well, I think one of the things that what I have seen evolve, and this is just like you, I have a podcast as well. I have a podcast, I have a book. But I started Sports Agent Academy because I knew that people would want to get, I've gotten the question many, many times, I want to be a sports agent. And so I created an online course where they can take the online course and I teach them how to do it. I also teach a 1-week intensive course at my law school and teach the students where I went to law school because my dean asked me to teach it. And I spend 1 week at the law school, and I have all students that are lawyers that are about to graduate from law school that take a 1-week intensive class with me, and I teach them how to be a sports agent. And that's something I think as a legacy, I find that to be very important, giving back and helping people that want to do what I want to do, because I did not have a mentor. Why? They're just too competitive. To me, I don't care. I'd rather help people get to where they want to go. So and online courses are great because, once they do that, they sign up for the course and then they can some of them call and ask me questions and they're like, Jill, you need to do a course on how to represent coaches because I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, Chantel, I will do that. Right now it's the draft. I said, but maybe that's something I'll consider taking on. Maybe I'll do it in June. I'll create another online course, but I'll gear it towards representing coaches rather than players. She actually represents basketball players, and she used my NFL process to utilize for her basketball stuff, her basketball players. And she has a lot of female basketball players too. And she's done really well, and she started a podcast, and so she just followed what I said. I also have a book called Born to be a Sports Agent, and my book also, it starts out with stories, from my family background. The middle part, those my processes I used for NFL players. And then the last part of the book is client stories to say, these are things that have happened, that you can learn from. So it's a very good book. Born to be a Sports Agent is a really good book to read if you are somebody maybe who just likes sports, but also just if you want to learn how to be an agent. And it's a very quick read, and there's lots of funny stories too. So I think as a legacy, I'm glad I created the online sport courses. I'm happy to give back to that community of people who want to do that. I'm glad I wrote the book because it answers a lot of the unanswered questions that people need, and I probably got to add to it because the NIL thing's changed. And then my husband and I also have a company called Academic Game Plan that helps people learn how to learn that are struggling academically, or not even struggling, just that want to do better academically. And that's also been something that he and I have done together, and we've done that for, gosh, probably almost 25 years, maybe we've had that program. So I hope my legacy is that, I did give back, and I did try to teach everybody everything that I know so that they can, be successful and do what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jill, finally, tell me, if people want to get connected with the good work that you do, what's the best way they can do that?
They can email me at jillbaxter@me.com. They can also go to my website at jillmcbridebaxter.com. And probably right now, the best thing is just go to my website, see which category you fit in, and click on that. And I have free webinars. You can watch the webinar, get on my email list. I send out Tuesday tips, and pretty much every Thursday I usually drop a podcast. Sometimes, I might skip a week if I'm super busy, but I pretty much try to drop. And I have 4 years of content, 4 years of podcasts. So I have a lot of episodes. So there might be an even previous episode that somebody, because it's called Representation Without Taxation. It's basically free advice.
Well, fabulous.
So that's another resource for people. So I have several resources, online courses. Go to my website, jillmcbridebaxter.com. It's all on there. I have a blog on there too. I send emails weekly, and all those resources, online course, book, my podcast, and then I think those are probably, and then my free webinars. I also have a YouTube channel. I've got some YouTube stuff on there, different videos and stuff. For different people. But yeah, I have lots of different resources for people.
I can see that, and I really appreciate your time today, Jill. I know how busy your schedule is this time of year. So I appreciate you engaging in conversation with me today. As an old sports reporter myself, I was super excited when you agreed to do this. I want to wish you the best of luck with your future endeavors, my friend, and I want to thank you for joining me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. So thanks for your time, Kevin. I appreciate it.